So welcome to the very first virtual Tech Inclusion Global Summit. My name is Melinda Epler. I'm the founder and CEO of Change Catalyst.
Hi, I'm Wayne Sutton, co-founder and CTO.
And please join me in welcoming Katelin and Alexis to the stage, and we'll be talking about leadership during COVID-19.
Hi, Katelin.
Hi, Wayne. How are you?
Good. How you doing?
I'm doing just fine. Good morning to both of you.
Good morning.
I think we're just trying to get Alexis out of the green room. He gets stuck there with all of the free snacks.
Even the virtual game room. Good one.
Awesome. Okay. Well, in the meantime, maybe we could just talk about a few things while you're here. So how are you doing? What's going on in your household?
Oh, girl. Well, welcome.
Your family's been on like CNN, and what is happening?
We've got a lot going on in here. I'm trapped in this bunker with my beautiful family, my husband and my two babies. I have two little boys, a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old. And early in this pandemic, once they locked everyone down here in San Francisco, my boys were really struggling with watching our neighbors walk by every day. And they, their little noses pressed against the windows. They were like, "Mama, why do Dave and Kelly get to go out? Why are Nancy and Andy out there? We're stuck inside." And so we had to explain to them what it meant to be a frontline worker. So we live here in North Beach in San Francisco. We've been here for about 20 years. And we didn't realize how many of our friends and neighbors were really essential workers. And so we live in a building with a postal worker, with a pharmacist. We have grocery clerks. We have all kinds of folks out there, nurses, doctors, you name it, for essential workers, and they're all out there. And so, we tell the boys, like Mr. Rogers says, you got to look for the helpers. And after days on end of watching these folks, they said, "Mama, how can we be helpers? We want to be helpers." And I think they really were just trying to get out of the house. But anyway, long story short, my husband has been thinking about opening up a coffee shop here in the neighborhood for a while now. And so he had a ton of coffee. And so we opened up our second story window, which is about 6 feet off the ground with a hill. And we've been serving free coffee to all of our frontline workers and neighbors to create a little bit of community safely. And so to safely deliver the coffee, he uses a gorilla arm grabber. It's like a gorilla arm that's extended out of our window from the kids' toy box. And so we've been having some fun.
That's awesome.
Oh, thank you, Alexis. That's so great.
That's our coffee.
Yeah, no, this is serious.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. It is serious. It's very fun.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Been following along your Tales from the Bunker via Instagram too. Just your kids are fantastic.
Oh, thank you. We're trying to maintain in here.
So welcome, Alexis.
Hey, thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
Great. Thanks for joining. Good to see you. It's been a while.
Of course. Likewise, been a minute.
Yeah. I think the last offline time was we speaking at, I think you and Gary were speaking at NASDAQ doing something.
Oh, yes. We got to ring a bell. Which was shockingly uneventful because there's no bell to ring. It is just a button to push.
Oh, that's right.
It doesn't feel that good. It's just like, all right, we did it. I mean, it was still very satisfying. I don't want to trivialize the event, but the actual mechanics of it, very underwhelming. I expected to ring something. Exactly.
Yeah. Cool. Well, we appreciate you joining us, and thanks for joining us. Great to see both of you again, and this this time. No one can imagine where we are today.
No. So speaking of that, how are you all doing? How are you both doing? How are you doing with this work from home, shelter in place, parent from home, teach kids from home world?
I live vicariously through Katelin's Instagram. Our 2.5-year-old doesn't require much. I mean, there's a little learning going on, but it's not that serious. So I don't know how y'all are doing it, Katelin. I feel like there's a different theme every day that you all invent in order to distract the two of them and educate them.
Educate. Yeah. But, actually something. So, well, I'm a Virgo, which explains my need for structure. Not that we should judge that, but more importantly, I used to be a first and second grade teacher, and when I was working at Pixar Animation Studios, when I moved onto the story team, they actually taught us that it's far easier to create when you have constraints or boundaries. And so a theme actually allows you to think more creatively about like, hey, how do we bring, reading and writing into today's lessons, or how do we bring science into today's lessons? And so by having a theme like pirates, it's a lot more fun to say like, oh, what's the coolest, like how would pirates use science? And then you can get really, really froggy with it. So we've been having fun. I mean, don't be wrong, my mental health is absolutely suffering.
Yeah, there is just a I've long advocated for and loved remote work, both just 'cause selfishly that's been the defining characteristic of my work life probably for the last decade, being on the road and having to adapt to that. And I think we're fortunate at Initialized because software that we've built really runs the day-to-day operations of the firm a lot. So we can work asynchronously, we can work decentralized, and I think that has been a great strength for the org. But even with that advantage, with that huge unfair advantage for all the parents, we got a lot of parents at on the team. There is a new reality with having childcare be a full-time responsibility in addition to, in a lot of cases, 2 working parents. And I mean, we're trying to be supportive and flexible. I hope Katelin will agree. Now that I've got you on the spot here live, but the best part of the culture to deal with this difficult situation is the fact that most work really just needs to get done in a good way, not necessarily at a certain time or in a certain manner. Like it is more important that the stuff gets done. And so if that means, Katelin ends up responding to emails after hours once the whole house has calmed down. Like, that's fine. Like that, rare are the things in our line of work that are so urgent that require that kind of fast turnaround. And even when they happen, like we are pretty flexible thanks to software. But I do hope that as things return to normal, we don't lose sight of the fact that this has been a massive disruption on a lot of folks, many of whom won't be able to really return back to normal. And when it comes to something like childcare, I hope this is an area where technology and business, as well as government, can play a bigger role in helping come up with better solutions. Because there's going to be a second wave of this, not just as a pandemic in the winter, but this second wave of parents trying to come back to work, trying to sort out what their kids will be doing this summer, and a lot of infrastructure that it's not really ready for it.
Yeah. I think a lot about parental inclusion. I know that Wayne, Melinda, you and I have been talking for years back when we worked together at Reddit around what inclusive leadership really looks like. And I think at this moment, you hear the line, we're all in the same boat. And the reality is that we are not in the same boat. We are weathering the same storm, yes, but we are not in the same boat. And everyone's journey is difficult and challenging in its own way. But really, I think the spectrum is from those who are locked in their homes alone, and they're dealing with their own crisis of loneliness and really sorting out what that feels like, to the people like me who I don't remember the last time I was alone. My God, what I would give for that. In addition to the caregiving and the parenting and the educating, and my God, I'm a short order chef and a housekeeper and all of these things that mount. And I really do. I mean, this is not pandering because my boss is on the line with us, but not only am I very, very lucky and privileged to be employed still through this pandemic, but to have an employer that really is flexible and supportive and understands that it's okay to, I work 4 hours during the day. My husband and I pass the baton, and then I log back in at night and do my individual work, my program work. And I know that I am lucky. And so when I have those hard days and I want to hit my head against the wall, or, more realistically get into a shower and just cry by myself, I know that Alexis and Gary and the rest of the team are there supporting me, saying like, hey, if you need space, take the space. So anyway, I just want to say, like, inclusive leadership right now looks like a lot of different things, but I think that this is the call for compassion, the call for empathy, and the call for vulnerability. Like, quite honestly, no one knows what they're doing. Like, I mean, shit. Oh, sorry, don't, excuse me, bleep. Shoot.
There's no FCC here. They can't stop us. We're on the renegade internet.
We're live. There's no like 10-second delay or 5-second delay. It's all good.
With the censor button. Like, I'm just saying, you know, from our leadership, you know, at the federal level on down, no one knows the right thing here. And so I think that having the space for leaders to be vulnerable and really go out and make the hard calls, have conviction, but open yourself to understanding that, you know, you can redecide things. You don't have to commit to one decision at all times. I think that there's a big fear around that. And so I think that an important thing about inclusive leadership is having conviction combined with compassion.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah. Speaking of everything, and love the conversation where it's going, and y'all are awesome. And you touched on a lot in terms of like culture with Initialized and leadership, and everybody's not in the same boat. I'm curious, like, when things started, like what happened? What was one of the first things you all did at Initialized to say, like, things are changing the world, we need to adopt, we need to evolve, what was that decision making process? What was like, and then how did you communicate that with the team?
Yeah, I feel really lucky, and this is a blog post that's I need to write it, I need to get out of my head, but like, I feel really lucky because, you know, we had traditional roles in society, whether it was government or media, dropped the ball in a lot of ways with sort of alerting us in this country to the risk that COVID-19 faced. And I feel fortunate because I had people like in my Slack group, like Kim Cutler, one of our partners, who was on this in, I mean, how early, Kate? Like early January? I mean, this was something we were talking about in the org at the start of the new year, and something we were trying to keep top of mind for our portfolio companies, and then also internally. And as those months carried into February, and it started to become more and more sort of pressing for us to prioritize, not just within our portfolio, but then also within our org. I mean, my instinctive response is to be like, Katelin, what do we do? And I say this only half in jest, but like, these are exceptional circumstances. And no one has, I correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think anyone had a pandemic playbook in the people and culture like guide or library at the start of this year. But what's so heartening is that there is such a culture and sort of there's both a culture and a network around sharing and collaboration there, that like, I knew that Katelin could pull things from her own library, but also was working with other leaders in the industry to share. And a lot of stuff was happening publicly, right? There were Google Docs out there, and we all kind of adapted together. Did you feel that way, Katelin? I got that impression, and it made me feel very good.
This is one of my favorite things about, you know, we talk about silver linings through this crisis. And for me, for those that don't know, I used to be an operator I've been in tech for the last 10 years as a people and culture, or, you know, it's a fancy way of saying HR. And I've been pounding my fist on the table for the last decade about open sourcing. So I had a non-linear background. I didn't start my career in HR, but I got into it because I care deeply about people. And that didn't mean that I cared deeply about compliance or handbooks. I cared about people and the experience they were having. And so the community for a very long time, the HR community when I first got into it 10 years ago, they were very precious with all of their programming and their approaches to things, their compensation philosophies, because it was a competitive advantage. So if I, for example, knew what Twitter's compensation bands were, then I could make competitive offers and steal their talent. And watching the evolution over the last 10 years has just been absolutely phenomenal, because at the end of the day, people leaders it's very similar to other leadership roles like CEOs. It can be very lonely. We can't talk about the things that are happening within our organizations the same way that, you know, an employee can. And moreover, we're all kind of making it up as we go, gang. Like, that's the reality. There is a little bit of fake it till you make it. But when something like this happens, something that none of us have experienced before in our lifetimes, we have nothing to draw from. We have nothing to go back in the annals of history and say like, oh, I'm going to cherry pick out these best practices. So watching the HR community really step up into the open source space was phenomenal. And I was so proud that the very first company to open source their pandemic playbook was actually an Initialized company, Coinbase. And when I saw that come out, it was like, yes, this is it. So we just busted open the floodgates on sharing. And so watching the community start, back in February with pandemic playbooks, that's where it started. It went all the way through, my goodness, what do we do with a layoff or a furlough? How do we package this in a way that, how do you communicate empathetic or compassionate internal communication plans around massive layoffs? And then what are the actual paperwork requirements for California versus New York? And the people community showed up, and it's been phenomenal. So now every single person out there is typing away at their return to work programs and all of these new frameworks that are just, it's really cool.
Awesome. So what does the world need from leaders right now, from startup leaders, from leaders like you both? What does the world need right now? How are you coaching your companies, your portfolio companies around this, and what are you doing?
Katelin?
Well, so I'll give you a little fun fact. I started at Initialized just at the beginning of the year. And so I didn't have the privilege of knowing the majority of our portfolio founders at that point, when things really started to unravel. And so since then, I really have been thrown in the deep end, getting to know these companies, getting to know these founders. And I'll tell you this, I have watched, not just in our own portfolio, but I have watched companies and founders live and die by the strength of their mission, their vision, and their values. I know that sounds really silly, because yes, some industries just by the sheer nature of their business got hit really hard. But the ones that are pulling through really have that super defined mission and vision, because the reality is when we talk about inclusive leadership, we are asking people to take time away from their families, to take time out of their worry. If they have a sick, family member, heaven forbid somebody in their family actually got the virus and passed away. This is having us rethink all of our practices, all of our policies. And at the end of the day, all we have to lean against are our mission and our vision. We need our founders to tell their employees, this is why you're showing up every single day. This is why we're asking you to do this. And it's been really fun, honestly, to watch the way some of our companies within the portfolio have pivoted on their mission, not changing their mission, but pivoting the way, the how, and really using their values as a strong guide to that North Star to figure out how they can be of service.
Yeah, one in particular, Natanie Montgomery, she founded a company, NASA, at the end of last year, with the goal of ultimately becoming a Glossier for women of color. And her flagship launch is a salon in San Francisco. She's not only built out a first-class, beautiful salon experience, trained up staff, but also built the software to run the front end, so user experience. So you can just log on the website, book exactly what you want, and then also software on the back end to manage the stylists and all the sort of back office operations. So full stack experience, software, salon, brand. I mean, she did it all. Launches. We have the mayor at the ribbon cutting, tremendous press. It could not have gone better for her. And a couple weeks later, obviously shelter in place. And she did the right thing, obviously following through with that order. But then, here is a very early stage company, now with this existential threat and a team of people who she managed to convince over the last 9 months to join her on this quest. And you could not have a more a bigger existential threat to an early stage company. And so these are the moments when we look for leadership in our founders and our CEOs to say, all right, this is the situation. Let me take care of my people. Let me, first take care of myself and make sure the people in my family who who are potentially at risk are good. Let me take care of the people who work for me. And then let me figure out what I can deliver to my customers right now in this time of crisis, frankly. And this is when you really start to see what founders and what leaders are made of. And so she put together hair kits for a DIY sort of home styling session. And you don't have to go too far on Twitter or Instagram to see how excited so many people are, myself included, to get back to a barber or a salon, okay? So she knew there was strong demand. She had a brand that came out of the gate, 5 stars on Yelp, people flying in from across the country to visit the salon in San Francisco. And she said, all right, what can I do? I have enough inventory on hand to put together, this many kits. I'll launch a store, get this out, and within a day, sells out of everything. And now is doing sessions via Zoom, so she's able to keep those stylists working. Incidentally, if you ever want to learn how to cornrow, there's a class, I think it's on the 15th. And so these Naza hair kits, right, sold out. This is a business that was not the expected next step for her just a couple of weeks after launching the flagship salon, but it's what she had to do in order to adapt to a bad situation and be able to change the few things that were still within her control and then accept the things that weren't and be able to process that, but ultimately move on from it and to focus on the things that you could make change. And so seeing that kind of response is ironically, it is actually a way to use, it's a way to kind of judo move all of the negative disarray caused by something like COVID that would shut down a flagship salon and actually turn that into a more compelling vision for investors, for future employees, for customers, because you're taking a situation that should have wiped out your business and actually showed the resolve and adaptability and creativeness and ingenuity to make something that people want just as much, maybe even more, because they don't have to travel to San Francisco to get it. And I think we see those stories of leadership, and they make it. I mean, it's the reason why this job is so satisfying, because these are the founders who are going to be a big part of everything that is to come. All the amazing companies that are going to get built, sort of out of the pain of this period, are going to be built by CEOs like Natanie.
Awesome. That's a great story for both. And you're right. Alexis, I know you have to go soon. I want to thank you both, but real quick, what COVID-19 response solutions and organizations are you supporting, and what's needed? Like real quick, what are you supporting and what's needed?
You're on mute, Alexis.
Oh, sorry. Thanks, Katelin. Well, okay. I mean, obviously, it goes without saying, I support Gorilla Arm Coffee, which, I mean, seriously though, I will point this out. What I love about this simple act of kindness is the fact that there's no 100-person infrastructure. There's no massive budget of fundraising. This is human beings just being decent to other humans. And I think I know a couple of good friends of mine who have just gotten in the habit of will Cash App or Venmo folks money just randomly, who are doing this very they're being mensches. They're being just really good humans right now. And there's a lot of this kind of micro philanthropy that's happening that if you have the resources, I really encourage you to do. There are great organizations doing lots of good work. We're working with the New York City Housing Authority right now. I think we've donated now 60,000 Adams masks to some of the poorest communities in New York City. There are very important nonprofits that I would recommend like that. But then there are also just regular people who are doing things to make a difference in their communities. And if you can afford to Cash App them $10, $5, I think there's so much good that comes from that rarely gets. I mean, Ben happens to be very, very clever and creative, but that rarely gets publicity. That if you see this pop up on your Twitter feed or on your Facebook, I would encourage you to give if you can.
My final thought, thank you, Alexis. He will be absolutely thrilled to know. And for the record, all donations and tips that he's received through the window have all gone to our local group that works with our underserved population, our homeless population, to get them fed and our streets kept clean for them. So that is North Beach citizens. Yes, that's it. So yes, thank you for that. And I would say that my final thoughts would be, let's use our networks. You know, the audience that we have here today they care very, very much about making sure that our workforces are diverse and inclusive. And the best way that we can support this particular community right now and help all of our companies thrive on the back end of this is ensuring that we continue to have diverse, inclusive workforces. And so, you know, I think one of my fears is that when we go into panic mode, we rely on our cow paths that we've walked for so long, which means we go to our immediate networks instead of really thinking about hiring and engaging diverse perspectives in the workplace. And so if you are out there, I would challenge you to make 5 connections today. Make 5 connections between people who either have been laid off or looking for employment, and those that are still employing people. So overnight, we have businesses that are also booming for the ones that have collapsed. And so let's make sure that we get our diverse perspectives in those workplaces right now so we can avoid the unemployment lists.
Awesome. Thank you, Katelin, and thank you, Alexis. Thank you both for joining on this Take Inclusion Global Summit. Appreciate you both. Thank you for all you're doing, and stay healthy, stay safe, and you know, we all here, you know, doing what we can. So thank you.
Thank you
So much. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
It was good to see you.
Likewise.